Police officers, have you ever had an all-units call? And if so, what happened? I was doing a ride-along in college in a fairly small city in Georgia when we got an all-available units call. The address came in, the lights and sirens went on, and we were hauling it at about 120 miles per hour across town. I had no idea where we were headed until we got there. The only thing the officer said to me was, "No matter what happens, stay in the frickin' car. If you see anyone with a gun, call it out on the radio like this." They showed me how. "If any of us get shot, call it in and stay in the car." Then he took a deep breath, calmly got out of the car, and took off at a sprint toward a 40-person melee in front of the only adult club in town. We were the first car there. Over the course of the next 30 seconds, officers arrived and kept coming until they outnumbered the people fighting. The officer I was riding with was completely on his own for a 10-second eternity and was able to rip about 10 people apart from fighting before backup arrived. It was the single bravest and most humbling thing I've ever seen with my own eyes. When it was all over, he got back in the car with 3 drunk and beaten up dudes in the back, turned to me and said, "So, when are you going to sign up?" 25 years ago, smallish rural town, my dad was a beat cop on patrol. My cat brings in a live mouse and was playing with it in the kitchen, and my mum is deathly afraid of rodents, so she calls dispatch and tells them my dad needs to come home. Dispatch gets on the line and tells my dad to switch to a secured line. There's an emergency at home. My dad's driving home to take care of the issue when all the cops on patrol in my small town, probably like 4, come with sirens and lights blazing to my house because they all heard there was an emergency at my dad's place. My mother was mortified. Years ago, a friend of mine was a dispatcher for the county. He covered sheriff, EMS, and fire communications, and also worked with communicating with other agencies as well. From the state troopers, he got some sort of text communication, not a phone text, this was before that was a thing, and it referred to an accident with injuries at the intersection of I-40 and Business 85. Something along the lines of, collision I-40 bus, 85 injuries involved. The way it was abbreviated and written made him misread it. Instead of an accident at 85 Business, he thought there was a bus collision on I-40 with 85 people injured. He dispatched every gosh darn fire truck and ambulance the county had, and they showed up, and it's a 2-car wreck with minor injuries. Former cop here. The all-units call was basically a riot at a large nightclub in a very rough area of the neighboring city. Once things were finally calmed down and a dozen or so people were taken away, my boss wanted us all back in our city. I was amazed at not only how many cops showed up, but from where. Counties and towns I'd never heard of before. I looked up a few at the end of the shift, and some came from an hour or more away. I don't know how large this large nightclub was, but evidently it was large enough to support half of the state's police personnel. How bad was the riot? Was someone there on his 5-star wanted level in GTA? More from me, the ride-along guy from the first story. This one was definitely weird for my small town. Someone called 911 and claimed that their house had been bombed. So naturally the fire department, police, and medical were all dispatched. We were among the first to arrive, and I got the same "stay in the car until I say it's okay" line before the officer left to see what was going on. Firemen were checking for fires and finding nothing, EMTs were checking for injuries and shock and finding nothing, and police were checking for mad bombers and finding nothing. From where I was sitting in the patrol car, I had a nice view of everything. The house was a nice old Mill Village-style house that sat on a corner about 10 feet off the road. Most of the house was completely untouched except for the front left of the house, which was missing a chunk out of the corner about 4.5 feet tall and about 2 to 3 feet wide, approximately 4 or 5 feet off the ground. It looked like someone threw a homemade grenade at the corner of the house, except there were no signs at all of charring from an explosion. The hole was deep enough that you could see light coming from inside the house to the outside. Now I've been sitting in the car for about 30 minutes, and the sun has set with dusk growing darker by the minute. I decide that since none of these people have blown up, it's probably safe for me to get out and take a look as well. I find my officer in the crowd and he's cool with me looking around and taking some photos, so I do. I stay out of the way for the most part and I'm looking through the grass like everyone else to find any signs of some explosive device when I almost step in a huge ant bed about 30 feet from the house in the front yard. I noticed 2 things. Someone has already disturbed the ant bed because it looks like there's a huge gash in it, and 2, there's nobody that seems teed off enough about setting in a large ant bed to have done it. Aha! A clue! I figured, find the guy with a ton of ant bites and we've got our bomber. So I start looking for footprints around the ant bed because the grass was kind of wet and maybe I watched too much NCIS. I stood in between the ant bed and the house and could make out a faint line along the grass made up of 1-foot-long dashes every 8 to 10 feet that led into the woods behind the house, across the street. I followed them to see where they went, and they led to some train tracks, and the trail went cold. I went back to the ant bed and used my hand to trace a line that would go roughly towards the corner of the house that was damaged. From the corner of the house, I looked across the street towards the neighbor's grass and woods and saw one long dash through the grass and a tree with a huge gash in it. I got my officer and told him I thought I had figured it out, and would he come with me to check. He grabbed a couple of other guys and we set off towards the tree with the gash, and sure enough, about 6 feet off the side of the tree was some kind of wheel or brake or something from a train that had come off at speed, rolled through the front yard, hit the ant bed and house and ricocheted off the house and across the street to hit a tree. For a while, I was known around the department and city manager's office as Detective Ride-Along. When my buddy was still a new cop, he worked in a larger city. They'd just gotten the shoulder mics, the ones every cop now has mounted up by their mouth so they can call in easier. When new to them, they wore the cord in the front of their shirts, and it was always in the darn way. And great handles when people wanted to wrestle the cops. Jimmy was called in one night to a bar brawl. He strolled into the bedlam and it was almost over. He was a rookie, always getting the crap detail, so he was becoming famous among his department for ruining his uniforms. To the point he was having to come out of pocket to replace them. He walked into a vet telling him to cuff everyone still here. They'll sort them out later. Jimmy grabs the closest guy and they struggle a little bit and go down to the ground. As they do, rip, Jimmy splits his pants, clean up the backside. Knowing he's going to be the butt of the jokes anyway, he turns his head to announce to the other officers, "Well, that's another uniform down," and keys his mic. Base hears uniform down, so does everyone else in the county. The radio explodes with chatter, but the 3 cops at the bar already have their hands full, so they turn down their radios, which was screw-up number 2. Base decides to roll everything with lights to the scene. Jimmy said they were glad of the help when the first few cars rolled up, but they just kept coming. He was known as Jack the Radio Ripper until he transferred. Minor reprimand, and he still had to pay for the pence. Man, I would never be cool enough to say, send everything with lights. So I interned at the local police department at a time when all stations received new radio devices. The new devices looked a bit like old cell phones and had a bright orange panic button on top. It was meant for situations where a single police officer was attacked and needed help. Pushing that button resulted in all communications on the standard Channel 1 being turned one-way communication only, so all units would listen to what's going on wherever the panic button was pressed, and an automatic all free units call. All other units had to switch to the much weaker Channel 2 to communicate, but Channel 2 only allowed one device to speak. So basically either dispatch or car 1 or car 2, etc. could talk, but not multiple people at the same time like on Channel 1. To disable the panic mode, you had to push the bright orange button in a certain way, think holding it for 3 seconds followed by 4 quick pushes, and it couldn't be done remotely. This happened in rather a large city where some police stations were closed at night. Usually the ones in the suburbs where few calls came in. That night, an older police officer closed down the remotest station in the suburbs and decided to shut off the radio devices. You guessed it, he pushed the panic button on top because he thought that's where the devices were turned on and off, without realizing what he'd done. He locked the station and went home. Since it was the first day of using the new radio devices, quite a few officers were unsure of how to turn to Channel 2. Basically, all communication was blocked. Cue panic everywhere with frantic cell phones to dispatch, and dispatch trying to figure out who closed the station so that panic mode could be disabled. And remember, they only had one key to open it. So this unintentional all units call turned into an actual no units can call, though quite a few units were busy trying to resolve the situation. Well, that's a whoopsie and a half. Sorry, entire city's police force, my finger slipped. Oh, and I couldn't call in to help resolve the situation because I went home to sleep. Former Royal Canadian Mounted Police here in a small tourist town was working on a regular mid-weekday shift when we received a dispatched call for a bomb threat in the industrial commercial sector of the town. We all went there, called in the bomb squad, the dogs, got people out of the area and so on. We were doing roadside when we got another call that the local bank's silent alarm was turned on. Now, we're in Canada, in a tourist town, things are usually relatively calm. But this was absolutely chaotic. We got the all-unit call, they call our neighboring detachment to help, we all split and head to the bank. We arrived, some 20-odd patrol cars all around, to see the bank employees bound and gagged, smoke everywhere from smoke bombs. We realized very quickly that the bomb threat was the diversion. We immediately got a bolo out to get the 3 males identified by the bank staff, including a former bank employee. We get the bolo out to CPIC, Got words to airports and border crossings. We managed to catch 2 out of the 3 guys. The last one flew back to his home country. He had been in Canada on a student visa. We remained on high alert for days after this looking for the 3rd guy. Canadian authorities worked with their colleagues from the guy's country to get him extradited almost a year later. In the end, as I recall, about 130 grand was missing and never recovered. For most of us, it was the first time we had a bomb threat or a robbery. First time we were guarding an area expecting to be shot from an unknown location. The robbers were reported to have AK-looking weapons. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. We usually get our all units call about once a month or so. We're taught that if you need backup, if crap is hitting the fan, call it in and worry about how many people come later. A unit was on patrol 2 weeks ago and some guy just started shooting at him. All the unit got out was 34th Street, 1033, I'm taking fire. 1033 being the code for send the cavalry or officer in need of assistance. It all ended fine, we caught the guy with no injuries, but you'd better believe every officer in our area dropped what they were doing and went. Another recent one was a mini riot breaking out at a candle vigil for a murder victim. An officer stepped in alone, bad move, to stop the fight, and started getting his butt handed to him. All he said was, Padamic 1033, but it worked. We came in, dispersed the crowd, and got out. Also, good chance to rant about a pet peeve of mine. When a 1033 goes out, there's always a few units who block the air with useless chatter. Hold me responding, what's the location? Dispatcher, I'll come back to my current assignment later. Do they need a rifle on scene? It drives me crazy. Get off the radio and leave the air clear for the unit fighting for their lives. And every unit not on something absolutely necessary is required to respond. Why would you waste time to say you're going? No crap you're going! There was an episode of This American Life where an officer accidentally locked himself in the back of his car when he went to take a nap. He left his radio in the front, so he called dispatch and was like, "Don't make this a big thing, just send 1 unit to me." And then dispatch proceeds to call the code for officer down, so then he heard a bunch of cars put on their sirens and race to him. I got run over by someone fleeing the scene of an incident that they weren't involved in. He just got scared and apparently had a gun on him. I was out of my car talking to the person who called and my partner was trying to stop the person who was really called on. So he didn't even see me get hit. No one knew I got hit or where I was because my radio went flying. Luckily there were a lot of witnesses who called 911 and found my radio. I confused the dispatcher because I was in so much shock that I came over the radio talking like I normally do. But I was bleeding badly from my head and broke my leg. I didn't feel the pain for about 2 hours, so I had that call come out because of me. I'm pretty sure a policy got made because of me too. What's the policy say? Don't move in front of a fleeing vehicle or threaten to shoot at one unless the occupant is firing at you with a gun. Apparently me yelling, "Stop the car" with my gun out while the car was accelerating down the street, going the wrong way, is what made him turn into me and hit me when I moved out of the way. Might not have been an all-units call, but the day my daughter went unresponsive after having a febrile seizure, the 911 dispatcher sent out unresponsive 2-year-old, and we had about 30 EMT, police, firefighters at our house in minutes. We live in a rural area, short distance from fire and ambulance hall, and everyone is a member EMT. Thankfully, she was okay, but it was scary for us at the moment when her temperature wouldn't go down and then she passed out. As the story goes in Duluth, Maine, for a long time the radio signal that available officers could meet for Dunkin' Donuts was the code word Broken Arrow. One day, a non-Duluthian was in the local newsroom when this was overheard. He got alarmed and told the rest of the newsroom that the code word likely meant that the police station was at that moment overwhelmed and outgunned, and they were calling all available units to help. Reporters rushed to the scene to find donuts. That code word is no longer used. In fairness, Broken Arrow does sound infinitely more ominous than a snack break. If I heard that code word, I would assume that stuff was going down. I mean, these kinds of call-outs happen all the time. Officers in a fight, possible subject with a firearm, major traffic accident. It's not anything like in the movies. If it's a big enough incident, all your available units are going to be going. I called 911 a couple of weeks ago because there was a couple involved in a domestic at a gas station, and I heard the phrase, "Give me the knife." Relayed all info I could to the dispatcher, and not even 5 minutes later, 2 village police units and 4 deputy sheriffs rolled up. Weapons out, yelling at the dude. I thought I was about to watch this guy get shot. This was probably around midnight. I wouldn't be surprised if those 4 deputies were all the units on duty that night. I work as a police communicator at a local university. Usually an all-units call is a fire alarm at one of the buildings. However, most of the time it's a false alarm and someone just burnt the popcorn at the lounge. One morning at work, we were evacuated from a rather large office building, 50 or more floors in New York City. Fire alarms went off on 3 floors because someone burned their popcorn in the microwave. That person will never live it down. I once got an all-unit call to my house. The backstory is that my mum was dating a crystal head and everyone knew who he was. They also knew our address. I was about 15 and one night he went off the rails and was beating the crap out of my mum. I got involved just in time to see him swing at my sister, who was 7 at the time. I ran for the phone and called it in. I got as far as the address when he grabbed me by the neck and threw me. Well, the dispatcher heard my garbled yelp and called it in as a possible homicide in progress. That, combined with his reputation, sent every single cop in the surrounding jurisdictions come flying our way. By the end of it, I think there were more than 20 police officers at our house. I ended up hitting him with my mum's cast-iron skillet to keep him there, just as the first officer showed up. The officer was super cool about it and pretended he didn't see a thing. It was a terrible night and my mum was mad at me for months. But man, you don't mess with my little sister. Was a military police officer on a rather large base. I was getting off shift and being transported back to my barracks by the guys coming on shift so I could check in my weapon. Suddenly, we got a call for all units to respond to a section of base housing. A military wife was having an affair with another soldier while her husband was on deployment. Supposedly, the husband was due to return soon, so she tried to break it off with the other guy. He responded by stabbing her several times. My team leader and I searched the tree line with our weapons drawn because he was armed and it was dark outside, you know? I actually passed the guy with my team leader a few yards behind me, and suddenly the suspect comes out saying, "You're looking for me." It scared the crap out of me. My team leader covered him while I went in for the handcuffing, making sure that I had my knee firmly planted in between his shoulder blades and thoroughly covering his upper torso into the muddy terrain. Not sure what happened after that. He was taken to a holding cell by another squad and I got to go home. Ended up getting transferred from that base a few months later, but I know the wife survived the wounds. Too many examples. London riots, units attacked with a machete, large group fighting with knives, building fires, so on and so forth. I was at one of the lakefront beaches in Chicago a few summers ago when, according to news reports later, a party a quarter of a mile down the trail from us started getting out of hand. Apparently, the party got way overcrowded, so a pair of cops rolled up in a squad car to get the mariachi band to quit, in hopes of folks losing interest and dispersing. This was a no-go and the crowd responded by, among other things, breaking the squad car windows and surging in around the cops, one of whom put out an "oh crap" call. I don't know the details, but apparently Chicago cops have a code that basically means drop whatever you're doing and get the frick over here. Because within 90 seconds, Wilson Ave looked, I crap you not, like that epic car chase at the end of the Blues Brothers. If I had to guess, it must have been at least 50 cars hauling butt down onto the lakefront, one after the other. Like a high-speed parade of cop cars celebrating, "We're going to frick you up then arrest everybody" day. Which basically, it was. My father was a Port Authority Police Department officer for more than 30 years. 2 times he had all-unit calls. First was the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, and the second was September 11, 2001. If he didn't pass away from an illness related to his time at the World Trade Center site in 2001, he'd be able to convey his impressions of that day better than I could. I recently found his handwritten notes from that night. They were jumbled together on his notepad and placemats from a diner in the area. The first and only cavalry charge I've seen was in Brooklyn. There was this ride on the W12 and Bowery and Coney Island in the late 80s called the Polar Express. You've all seen it. It's that ride that goes really fast around, then it goes backwards while blasting really loud music. Stupid, but whatever. This also attracted every broke bum in Brooklyn who couldn't afford to get into a club, or people who were thrown out of all of them, on weekends, and it was always a freaking nightmare. There were always fights, but you learned to let them tire themselves out a bit before you waded in because things could get ugly. I was detailed to this thing with a small army of other rookie cops on the 4th of July weekend. We were told in no uncertain terms not to go into the crowd. Ever. Nothing is happening in there that's worth your safety. So of course, a brawl breaks out and someone immediately goes running in. Now please understand, you have to go now. You can't leave the other guy alone even if he did mess up. The crowd parts for us like Moses parting the Red Sea, and then it closes on us and the airmail, rocks and bottles, come sailing. We're pretty much back to back like in the movie 300, but we're vastly outnumbered and out inebriated. We're fighting our way out and there's backup trying to fight its way in to get to us, but it's taking time, and I don't know if you've literally fought for your life, but it's freaking tiring. That adrenaline jolt only buys you so much time. Then I saw it, a flying wedge formation of mounted charging down West 12th into the crowd at full speed, with the sergeant in the middle with his nightstick held out like he was ordering a charge, and a crap-eating grin that said he'd waited his entire life to do this. I think the horse was smiling too. You'll hear the term crash a lot, and it's hyperbole. Not here. No, these guys crashed into this riot and sent bodies flying everywhere, like the bow of a great warship cutting through a stormy sea. A blue, black leather, and rowan battleship. The crowd dispersed in about 3 minutes flat, equally as stunned by what they saw as honestly the foot cops were. I know sometimes people complain about the cost of maintaining mounted police units because they're seen as unnecessary backdrop for tourist photos, and oh my god, I'm living proof that they're so much more valuable than that. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.